I overheard my daughter's fiancé talking the day before the wedding. "The thought of having to sleep with her makes me sick," he said, and his friend replied, "Think about her wallet." They laughed, and I quietly walked away, hiding my anger. The next morning, he didn't wake up. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. Something felt wrong the moment I turned into the driveway, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The house stood before me, too bright for 9:30 p.m., with guest cars still scattered across the circular drive like abandoned chess pieces. Pool lights cast dancing reflections on the water, creating shadows that seemed to move with purpose. I cut the engine and sat in the sudden silence, listening to the tick of cooling metal and distant male laughter drifting from the backyard. The wedding was tomorrow, Emma's big day. Stanley and his friend Warren should have left hours ago. I stepped out of my truck, boots crunching on gravel that sounded unnaturally loud in the warm Texas evening. Jasmine hung heavy in the air, almost suffocating. Each familiar detail of my property appeared somehow foreign tonight. The garden path I'd walked for 30 years, the oak tree where Emma built her first treehouse, the fountain Margaret had insisted on installing. My body moved forward while my mind struggled to process this vague sense of wrongness. Male voices carried across the lawn, recognizable now. Stanley's practiced charm mixing with Warren's crude laugh. Nothing threatening about the sound itself, but context made everything ominous. Who laughs at 9:30 the night before a wedding when the bride went to bed an hour ago? My construction worker instincts, the ones that warned of structural weaknesses before collapse, triggered hard. I didn't consciously choose to move quietly. My body simply did it. Garden shadows swallowed me as I approached the library window, pressed against the house wall with controlled breathing. Through the open window frame, carried on the warm breeze, I could see them clearly. Stanley sat relaxed in a pool chair, whiskey glass catching the underwater lights. Warren lounged beside him, cigar smoke curling upward. Their body language spoke of conspiracy, of men who believed themselves safely alone. "Wedding logistics are finally locked down," Stanley was saying, swirling amber liquid in his glass. "Emma's so excited she can barely sleep." Warren chuckled. "Poor girl, all that planning for tomorrow." "The gift list alone took us 3 hours to organize," Stanley continued. "Her father's friends are generous people." I almost turned away. Wedding jitters, bachelor talk, innocent enough. Then Warren shifted forward, voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "You really going through with it?" The question hung in the night air like a physical presence. Stanley's response came slowly, like poison dripping from a wound. "What choice do I have? We're too deep in now." My confusion spiked. Deep in what? Wedding planning? Debt? Stanley continued, his voice carrying that exhausted quality of someone confessing a burden. "Honestly, Warren, I feel sick thinking about having to sleep with her." The words hit me like a physical blow. She's not my type at all. Too trusting, too naive, like a child playing dress-up. My fist clenched involuntarily. Warren's laugh grated against my eardrums. "Think about her wallet, buddy. 72 million company value. After the wedding, you'll have immediate access to all the contracts." The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew about my future son-in-law crumbled in real time. Stanley leaned back, suddenly animated. 6 months of patience, and we'll transfer every major contract to Redstone Development. The old man won't even understand what happened until it's too late. Warren raised his glass in a toast. "And when he does figure it out, Emma will sign anything I put in front of her. She trusts me completely." Stanley's smile was predatory. "Turner Construction becomes a subsidiary of Redstone within the year. 45 million in contracts, plus the client database. Everything they couldn't get through legitimate acquisition." The ceramic garden statue felt cold against my palm as I gripped it for support. My daughter, my Emma, was collateral damage in a corporate takeover. 6 months of courtship, engagement parties, wedding planning, all calculated, all fake. Their glasses clinked in celebration. The sound carried across the water like a death knell. I backed away with robotic precision, each step calculated to avoid lit windows and creaky floorboards. The house that had sheltered my family for decades now felt like enemy territory. My office door closed behind me with a soft click, first moment of safety since overhearing their conversation. But I didn't break down, didn't scream or throw anything, though part of me expected to. Instead, an eerie calm settled over me. The businessman emerging from beneath the shocked father. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey with a steady hand that surprised even me. Margaret's photograph watched from the desk, her smile frozen in better times. "I'm sorry you have to see this," I whispered to her image, "but I'll handle it." The legal pad came out, blue pen uncapped. While memory remained fresh, I wrote everything verbatim. Each word documented transformed pain into weapon. Stanley's voice echoed in my head as I transcribed his confession, Warren's crude encouragement, their casual dismissal of Emma's humanity. Outside, car doors slammed, engines started. Through the window, I watched taillights disappear down the driveway. 2 men who thought they had already won, heading home to sleep peacefully before their victory celebration. They thought I was just an old man, an easy mark. They forgot I'd built an empire from nothing, survived competitors who made Stanley Parker look like an amateur. By sunrise, I'd know everything about the man pretending to love my daughter. And by sunset tomorrow, he'd learn what it meant to cross a Turner. My laptop screen glowed harsh in the darkened office as I typed Stanley Parker, Austin, Texas into the search bar. The results loaded slowly. Financial consultant profiles, bland social media accounts, everything suspiciously generic, too clean, too perfect. In construction, I'd learned that pristine facades often hide the worst structural problems. I refined the search, adding redstone development to the query. One result appeared, a LinkedIn connection. My pulse quickened as I clicked through. There it was. Stanley Perkins, Business Development Specialist, Redstone Development 2021-2023. Not Parker, Perkins. Screenshot captured, saved to desktop. I created a new folder labeled Evidence and dropped the file inside. The investigation had officially begun. The office safe beckoned from behind Margaret's portrait. I spun the combination dial, her birthday, 0714, and listened to the familiar Tumblr clicks. Inside, organized files waited in labeled folders. Emma, wedding, sat thick with documents on the top shelf. The prenuptial agreement felt heavier than I remembered. Reading with a contractor's eye for dangerous details, I found what I was looking for in Section 7. In the event of marriage, spouse shall have immediate access to Turner Construction financial accounts and client contracts for transparency and partnership purposes. Stanley had insisted on that clause. Albert Campbell, my lawyer, had questioned its necessity. I'd approved it because Emma deserved equal partnership in any marriage. Now, the real purpose blazed clear as daylight. Yellow highlighter marked the crucial passages. A post-it note went beside them. Stanley insisted, why? The evidence pile grew methodically. Bank statements spread across my mahogany desk next. Stanley's credit check, required for the prenup, listed previous addresses and employment history. Cross-referencing with the LinkedIn discovery showed matching addresses but different names. A quick search through Texas Secretary of State Business Registry revealed multiple LLCs registered under Stanley Perkins, including Parker Consulting Group. The fake identity wasn't even particularly sophisticated, either a legal name change or simple alias usage, both indicating deliberate deception. Either way, Emma was marrying a man who didn't exist. At 12:30 a.m., I opened Google News and searched Redstone Development Turner Construction. The article from 14 months ago made my blood run cold. Turner Construction rejects $45 million buyout offer from Redstone Development. I remembered that meeting vividly. 3 aggressive executives pushing hard for acquisition, particularly interested in my client database. When I refused, they'd made thinly veiled threats about alternative approaches to market expansion. 6 months later, they tried again with a sweeter offer. Again, I refused. And then Stanley appeared in Emma's life. The timeline was perfect. Redstone's second rejection came in March 2024. Stanley and Emma met at that charity gala in April. Pure coincidence? Not possible. This was infiltration, corporate espionage with my daughter as the unwitting access point. I had to admire the audacity. 6 months of patient courtship, building trust, becoming family. It was chess played at master level, even if the target was my own blood. A fresh notebook page received my full attention. At the top, T-minus 36 hours to ceremony. Below that, 3 columns: assets, liabilities, options. Assets included my legal representation, Albert Campbell, friend for 20 years and sharp as any Manhattan attorney. Financial resources: the company was worth exactly what Stanley claimed, giving me leverage. Intelligence gathering, private investigator contacts from various business disputes. Most importantly, the element of surprise. They had no idea they'd been discovered. Liabilities felt more daunting. Time constraint was obvious. Emma's emotional investment ran deep. She genuinely loved this phantom. Social embarrassment of a canceled wedding would devastate her. And Stanley had months to prepare his manipulation tactics. Options required careful consideration. Legal action was too slow. Direct confrontation meant Stanley would turn Emma against me through emotional manipulation. Presenting evidence might work, but carried risk of seeming like jealous interference. Then the elegant solution occurred to me: prevent the ceremony without preventing Stanley from attending. Not drugs, that was illegal and dangerous. But medicine? Entirely different category. My own prescription sleeping medication sat in the bathroom cabinet. Powerful stuff prescribed after Margaret's death when insomnia nearly destroyed me. Strong enough to incapacitate, safe enough to avoid permanent damage, legal enough to avoid criminal charges if discovered. I underlined this option 3 times. Was it right? Morally questionable, certainly. But compared to what Stanley planned for Emma, no contest whatsoever. At 1:30 a.m., I dialed Albert's home number. The phone rang 4 times before his groggy voice answered. "Albert? Sorry to wake you." "Carol?" Sleep cleared from his voice quickly. "Do you know what time it is?" "I need you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. It's about Emma." Silence stretched across the connection. Albert had known Emma since she was 12, watched her grow up, celebrated her engagement. His concern was genuine when he spoke again. "What happened? Is she hurt?" "I can't explain over the phone. Just trust me on this one, please." "Of course. Should I bring anything specific?" "Your sharpest legal mind and complete discretion." After hanging up, my first real emotion since overhearing the conversation finally surfaced. My hand trembled slightly as I set down the phone. The next call should be to Emma. Warn her. Save her from public embarrassment. But without ironclad proof, she'd never believe Stanley capable of such deception. His manipulation was too thorough, her trust too complete. Better to show than tell. Evidence would speak louder than accusations. At 2 a.m., Stanley and Warren finally departed. Through my study window, I watched their casual exit. Relaxed body language, Warren playfully punching Stanley's shoulder before they separated to their cars. A celebratory high five sealed their confidence. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I walked through the house, checking locks from habit developed during Emma's childhood. At her bedroom door, I paused. Light was off. She was sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming of tomorrow's ceremony. My hand rose to knock, then stopped. What would I say? "Your fiancé is a fraud?" Without undeniable proof, it would sound like cruelty from an overprotective father. The evidence had to be overwhelming, indisputable. My hand dropped. I continued to the master bedroom, lying fully clothed on top of the covers. The ceiling fan rotated slowly overhead while the antique clock marked each passing second. Sleep wouldn't come, but rest could wait. In 7 hours, Albert would arrive. The real work would begin. Stanley Parker had 34 hours of ignorant bliss remaining. I intended to make every single one of them count. Tomorrow's sunrise would bring the beginning of his education in consequences. The Turner family protected its own. Always had, always would. The alarm's shrill cry cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 7 sharp. I hadn't slept. Couldn't have, even if I'd tried. Every time I closed my eyes, Stanley's words echoed, "She's not my type at all." The phrase had burned itself into my consciousness like acid on steel. I rose from bed with joints protesting the night's tension. My reflection in the bathroom mirror revealing a man who'd aged a decade in 6 hours. The shower's hot spray did nothing to wash away the bitter taste of betrayal that coated everything. By 7:30, I sat in the kitchen with black coffee, reviewing my handwritten notes while morning birds announced a day I wished would never come. The grandfather clock's steady tick marked each passing minute. 7:45, 8 O's, 8:30. Albert was due at 9. I rehearsed my presentation, organizing evidence with the same precision I'd once used for construction blueprints. The doorbell chimed at 8:55. Albert's punctuality hadn't changed in 20 years. "You look terrible," he said without preamble, his lawyer's eyes immediately cataloging my disheveled state. "Didn't sleep. Come in." I led him to my study and closed the door with deliberate care. Albert settled into the leather chair across from my desk, while I arranged documents with methodical precision. The prenuptial agreement went on top, followed by printed screenshots of Stanley's LinkedIn profiles, both Parker and Perkins versions side by side. "I heard every word Thursday night," I began, sliding the transcribed conversation across mahogany. "They're planning to use Emma to access my company's contracts." Albert's reading glasses slid down his nose as he examined each page. His finger traced the suspicious prenup clause while I explained the overheard conversation. My phone recording app still containing their damning words. Professional focus replaced his initial concern as the scope of deception became clear. "If this is corporate espionage, it's criminal," Albert muttered, photographing documents with his phone. "But litigation takes months, Carol. Even expedited injunctions need 48 to 72 hours minimum. The wedding's in 28 hours. Albert leaned back, processing the timeline problem. "Then we need irrefutable evidence, fast, someone who can work weekends and doesn't ask questions." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "Irving Evans, former detective turned private investigator. If anyone can build a case overnight, it's him." The drive downtown took 20 minutes through Saturday morning Austin traffic. We parked in the Congress Avenue garage and rode the elevator to the 5th floor in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. Irving's office door bore simple lettering: Evans Investigations. The man who answered our knock still carried himself like a cop despite civilian clothes. Weathered face, sharp gray eyes, handshake that could crack walnuts. His office walls displayed commendations from his police career alongside current PI credentials. "What's the situation, gentlemen?" I presented the case with businessman's efficiency. No emotional appeals, just facts and evidence. Irving listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow pad. When I finished, he asked 3 questions that cut straight to the heart of matters. "What's your endgame?" "Stop the wedding." "Legal or personal resolution?" "Both." "Budget?" "Whatever it takes." $5,000 for a 24-hour rush job. I'll need to call in favors, but I can get you bank records and employment verification, communications if they exist. He was already reaching for his phone. Initial findings by 6 tonight, complete report by 9. I nodded agreement, and Irving immediately began working, calling a contact at the bank while we watched, then texting a former police partner about accessing Redstone's building records. This was a man who understood urgency. Driving home at 1:15, I steeled myself for the hardest performance of my life. Emma's voice drifted from the living room as I entered. She was singing while organizing wedding favors, surrounded by white boxes and gold ribbon, like a bride in a fairy tale. "Dad, where have you been all morning?" Her face lit up with pure joy that made my chest constrict painfully. "Running errands, last-minute surprise for you and Stanley." The lie came easier than it should have. She gave me a tour of her preparations, the dress hanging like a ghost in its protective bag, jewelry sparkling on the dresser, shoes that had cost more than most people's rent. Each item represented dreams that Stanley was methodically destroying. "Are you nervous?" she asked, arranging boutonnieres with careful precision. "Should I be?" I managed a smile that felt carved from stone. "Stanley keeps asking if you really like him. I told him you're just protective. You know how dads are with daughters." The irony cut deep. If only she knew how protective I was prepared to be. Stanley called during our conversation, and Emma put him on speaker without thinking. His voice filled the room with practiced warmth. "Just confirming dinner tonight at 6, looking forward to our last meal as future family." "We'll be ready," I replied, my tone perfectly calibrated to match his false friendliness. After Emma ended the call, I excused myself to text Albert. "Dinner with him tonight. Not sure I can maintain the act." His response came quickly. "You have to. We're almost there." At 6:30 sharp, Stanley arrived carrying flowers for Emma and expensive whiskey for me. The kind of thoughtful gestures that had initially impressed me. Now I recognized them as calculated moves in a long chess game. Dinner became an exercise in theatrical endurance. Stanley performed flawlessly, complimenting Emma's cooking, asking about my current construction projects with what seemed like genuine interest, discussing honeymoon plans with appropriate excitement. I studied every micro-expression, recognizing manipulation where I'd once seen sincerity. His hand rested possessively on Emma's shoulder. His questions about upcoming contracts were too specific, too casual. His smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at me. Irving's call came during dessert, and I stepped into the hallway to answer. Preliminary findings confirm everything. Irving's voice was grim. It's worse than you thought. Full report at 9. Returning to the table, Stanley asked casually, "Everything all right? You seem tense." "Minor crisis with a vendor. Nothing that can't wait until Monday." The remainder of dinner passed in slow agony. Finally, at 9:15, Stanley and Emma left together. She was staying at a hotel tonight for wedding tradition. I watched from the porch as they drove away, Emma laughing at something Stanley whispered in her ear. My laptop was already open when I returned inside. Irving's email waited with a PDF attachment labeled Stanley Perkins, Comprehensive Investigation. The first page showed Stanley wearing a Redstone employee badge. The second contained bank records revealing transfers totaling $45,000. The third displayed email chains with subject lines like Turner Infiltration, Phase 2. My phone rang before I could read further. "You getting this?" Irving's voice was professional but concerned. Page by page. Turn to page 20. Timeline reconstruction shows this operation was planned 18 months ago. Your daughter meeting him at that architecture conference? Arranged. Every step calculated. By page 15, I understood that legal action was too slow. By page 30, I knew exactly what I had to do. Albert arrived within 10 minutes of my call, his face grave with the urgency in my voice. We sat in my study reviewing Irving's damning evidence page by page. Employment records proving Stanley's real identity, financial trails showing systematic payments, communications revealing the full scope of conspiracy. The most devastating document appeared on page 34, an email from Redstone's VP of Acquisitions to Stanley. Once married, immediate access to Turner client database. 6 months extraction, then initiate divorce proceedings. $500,000 bonus upon completion. Albert whistled low, his lawyer's composure finally cracking. "This is RICO territory, Carol. Criminal conspiracy at the corporate level. Can we stop it legally?" Albert's pause told me everything. Even expedited legal action requires 72 hours minimum. Emergency injunctions need judicial review, filing procedures, service of process. He met my eyes directly. "The wedding's in 14 hours. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of impossible timing pressing down like a collapsed building. Finally, I spoke the words that had been forming since page 15. "There's another way." I explained my pharmaceutical approach carefully, emphasizing the legal aspects. Prescription medication prescribed to me, temporary effects, no permanent harm. Albert's objections came swift and sharp. "That's drugging someone without consent, Carol. He'll voluntarily consume what I serve him. You're splitting legal hairs. But am I wrong?" Albert stared at his hands, wrestling with professional ethics versus personal loyalty. After a long moment, he looked up. "What about Emma? She'll be humiliated when he doesn't show. Better temporary humiliation than years of systematic exploitation." I told him about my afternoon visit to Dr. Williamson, woven between leaving Irving's office and meeting Emma. The appointment had been strategic, mentioning stress-related insomnia, anxiety about Emma's marriage changing our relationship, requesting short-term pharmaceutical help. Dr. Williamson, who'd treated our family for 15 years, had been sympathetic. "Wedding stress affects many fathers," he'd said, prescribing Ambien 10 mg with a 30-day supply. The pharmacy stop at CVS had been routine, filling the prescription, reading warning labels carefully. Later research on medical websites confirmed that 40 milligrams would produce 8 to 12 hours of deep sleep, well above therapeutic dose, but within safety parameters. "Last chance to do this through proper legal channels," Albert said, as I crushed 4 tablets in Margaret's old mortar and pestle. "Legal takes too long. This works tonight." Albert left reluctantly, understanding the need for plausible deniability. At 11:50, my phone buzzed with an unexpected text from Stanley. "Hey Carol, impromptu bachelor party. My place fell through. Can we use your patio? Just me plus Warren plus 2 college buddies. Couple hours max?" Providence had delivered opportunity directly to my door. "Of course, come over." I worked quickly, arranging patio furniture, stocking the bar cart with premium spirits, setting up the poker table with new cards and chips. The white powder went into a small envelope, tucked securely in my shirt pocket. They arrived at midnight in high spirits. Stanley, Warren, and 2 men introduced as college friends, whose names immediately disappeared into irrelevance. Already drinking from their previous location, they brought loud laughter and congratulatory energy that felt obscene, given what I now knew. I played the generous host perfectly, pouring drinks with liberal hands, offering Cuban cigars from my humidor, dealing cards with the easy familiarity of someone who'd hosted many such gatherings. The conversation flowed with typical bachelor party crudeness, Warren making sexual jokes about the wedding night that made my fists clench under the table, Stanley expressing confidence about joining the Turner family business, with veiled suggestions about future opportunities. At 1:15, drinks ran low. "Another round, gentlemen?" I stood casually, gathering empty glasses while the men remained focused on Warren's increasingly crude story about his own wedding night. At the bar cart, my back turned to the group, I prepared fresh drinks with practiced efficiency. Stanley's glass received special attention. The envelope's contents dissolved completely in aged whiskey, stirring until no trace remained visible. "To the groom," I announced, returning with the tray. "Last night of freedom." We raised our glasses in unison. Stanley drained half his in one swallow, then finished the remainder within minutes. I watched every drop disappear while maintaining casual conversation about golf and business prospects. The effects manifested gradually. Yawning at 1:30, eyes drooping by 1:45, slightly slurred speech at 2 parcels, nearly falling asleep at the poker table by 2:15. Warren noticed his friend's deteriorating condition with concern. "Bro, you okay? You look destroyed." Stanley rubbed his eyes heavily. "Just exhausted. Long week leading up to tomorrow." Warren made the decision for both of them. "We should head out. Big day coming up." Stanley agreed without argument, standing unsteadily while Warren helped stabilize him. I offered my guest room, but Stanley declined politely. "Hotel's only 5 minutes away." I watched from the patio as Warren guided Stanley to the passenger seat, then drove them into the night. Stanley's head was already lolling against the window as their taillights disappeared around the corner. Cleanup took 30 minutes, glasses washed thoroughly, ashtrays emptied, poker chips returned to their case, furniture rearranged to its normal configuration. My phone alarm was set for 7 a.m. I needed to be at the church by 10, as father of the bride. The mathematics were simple. Current time 2:30, wedding ceremony 11s, 8.5 hours remaining. Ambien's peak effectiveness occurred 90 minutes after ingestion, lasting 10 to 12 hours. Stanley would sleep until at least 1 p.m., missing everything that mattered. I sat alone on my darkened patio, surrounded by the detritus of what might have been Stanley's last moment of confidence. Distant traffic hummed on Mopac. Night-flying insects buzzed around the pool lights, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote's howl echoed across the hills west of Austin. Tomorrow would bring reckoning in multiple forms. Emma would face heartbreak and public embarrassment. Stanley would wake to discover his carefully constructed life in ruins. I would have to explain why I'd allowed events to unfold as they did, knowing I could have prevented them. But tonight, I'd given Stanley Parker exactly what he deserved, nothing at all. In 9 hours, Emma would stand at an altar, waiting for a groom who'd never arrive. And I'd finally have to explain why. Dawn broke through my bedroom window at exactly 6:47 a.m., painting everything in shades of amber and regret. I hadn't slept, couldn't have even if I'd wanted to. Instead, I'd spent those early hours running calculations in my head, checking my phone every 15 minutes for calls that thankfully never came. No calls meant Stanley was still unconscious. No calls meant my plan was working. By 7 sharp, I rose and began the methodical ritual of preparing for what should have been my daughter's wedding day. The shower's hot spray did nothing to wash away the metallic taste of revenge that had settled in my mouth. Shaving required steady hands, steadier than they'd been in days. The charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, silver tie. Each piece of wedding attire felt like armor for the battle ahead. At 8:30, I sat in my kitchen with black coffee, checking my phone obsessively. Still nothing from Stanley or Warren. Perfect silence was the sound of success. But while I maintained this calculated calm, across town at the Four Seasons, a very different drama was unfolding. Warren would tell me later, his voice still shaking, exactly what happened after they left my house at 2 a.m. The valet had opened Stanley's door to find him slumped against the passenger seat, barely conscious. Warren had joked about too much celebration while helping Stanley stumble across the marble lobby. The night desk clerk watched them with the weary eye of someone who'd seen countless intoxicated guests, making mental notes about potential problem visitors. In the elevator, Stanley leaned heavily against the mirrored wall, eyes unfocused, mumbling incoherently. Warren attributed it to the whiskey and the late hour. Bachelor party nerves finally catching up. At room 847, Stanley collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, shoes still laced, jacket buttoned, his phone sliding from his pocket to the carpet below. "You good, man?" Warren had asked. Stanley's response was unintelligible. Within minutes of Warren leaving, Stanley lost consciousness completely. The Ambien hit its full effect by 2:45 a.m., dragging him into a sleep so deep that earthquakes couldn't have woken him. At 8 a.m., Warren woke naturally and checked his phone. Text messages from friends congratulating Stanley, reminders that the ceremony started at 11 CU. He sent Stanley a text. "Rise and shine, groom." No response. By 8:30, Warren had showered and dressed. He texted again. "Yo, we need to get moving." Still nothing. A phone call went straight to voicemail. Stanley's phone lying dead on the hotel room floor, unreachable. Warren knocked on door 847 at 8:45. "Stanley, wedding day." Silence. Louder knocking produced the same result. Now genuinely concerned with only 2.5 hours until ceremony, Warren went to the lobby. The desk clerk initially refused a wellness check, privacy policies and all that. But Warren's insistence about a wedding in few hours and potential medical emergency convinced security to investigate. At 9:05, the security guard used his master key to enter room 847. They found Stanley motionless on the bed, breathing steadily but completely unresponsive to voices, shaking, or bright light. The guard checked his pulse, steady at 58 beats per minute, then immediately called paramedics. 2 EMTs arrived at 9:30 with full emergency equipment. Their assessment was clinical and efficient. Vital signs stable but patient, showing concerning Glasgow Coma Scale scores. They found the glass with amber liquid residue on the nightstand. "What did he drink last night?" one EMT asked Warren. "Just whiskey, at his future father-in-law's place. He doesn't do any medications." The EMT sniffed the glass. "Smells like whiskey, but his presentation suggests sedative overdose." Stanley was loaded onto a gurney with oxygen mask and cardiac monitor, Warren following the ambulance to St. David's Medical Center. At 10:20, emergency room doctors ordered immediate toxicology screening and comprehensive metabolic panels. Warren sat in the waiting room, phone trembling in his hands. Should he call Emma? Call me? He decided I should know first. I was the father, after all. My phone rang at exactly 10:45. I was standing in St. Mary Cathedral's office with Albert, both of us wound tight with anticipation. Guests were beginning to arrive outside. I could hear the organ's soft prelude through the walls. I'd checked on Emma at 10:40. She was radiant in her bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids, asking repeatedly, "Where's Stanley? Has he called?" "Warren," I answered, stepping into the empty hallway. His voice exploded through the phone. "Mr. Turner! It's Stanley! He's in the hospital. He won't wake up. They think he overdosed on something, but I swear we only had drinks at your place." I delivered my performance flawlessly. Shock, concern, rapid-fire questions about his condition and location. Warren explained through rising panic while I maintained the perfect tone of a distraught future father-in-law. "Which hospital?" I asked. "St. David's on 32nd Street. I'm at the church. I need to tell Emma. We'll be right there." After hanging up, I stood in that hallway for exactly 30 seconds, listening to the organ music swelling in preparation for a processional that would never happen. Through the doorway, I could see Emma in her bridal suite mirror, bridesmaids adjusting her veil, her smile radiant with anticipation. I walked to the bridal suite door and knocked twice. Emma opened it immediately. "Dad, 5 minutes. Are you ready?" The wedding dress had cost $8,000. It would never be worn to an altar. The flowers had cost $3,500. They would wilt in the church pews. The reception had cost $42,000. It would feed confused guests asking what happened. But my daughter's future? That was priceless. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "something's happened with Stanley." Emma's smile died instantly. The joy drained from her face like water from a broken dam, replaced by the kind of fear that every bride's nightmares are made of. "What do you mean?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Behind her, bridesmaids clustered closer, sensing crisis with that peculiar female intuition that picks up distress signals before words are even spoken. I gestured them out of the room with my eyes, and thankfully they retreated to the hallway. "Stanley's in the hospital," I said, closing the door behind me. "Warren just called. He's unconscious. They don't know why." Emma's processing was visible, confusion giving way to panic, panic building toward hysteria. "Unconscious? What do you mean unconscious? Like in a coma?" "No, sweetheart. His vital signs are stable, but he won't wake up. The doctors think he might have taken something." "Taken something?" Emma's voice pitched higher. "Stanley doesn't do that. He barely drinks. What are you talking about?" I watched my daughter collapse into the white satin chair, her veil falling askew, the bouquet she'd clutched for photos now forgotten on the floor. The sound that came from her wasn't quite crying. It was something more primal, the noise someone makes when their world suddenly stops making sense. Bridesmaids rushed back in despite my earlier dismissal, voices overlapping in concern and confusion. Emma looked up at them through tears. "Stanley's in the hospital." The room exploded into chaos. Multiple conversations, cell phones appearing, someone calling for smelling salts. I established control with the voice that had commanded construction sites for 40 years. "Everyone calm down. Emma, I'm going to the hospital to find out what's happening. You should stay here. I'm coming with you. You're wearing a wedding dress." "I don't care." Within 3 minutes, Emma had stripped off the $8,000 gown, not carefully, but yanked over her head like emergency clothing removal, and pulled on jeans and a t-shirt someone had grabbed from a bridesmaid's overnight bag. At 11:08, I walked into the sanctuary where 150 guests sat checking their watches and whispering among themselves. The ceremony should have started 8 minutes ago. I approached the altar where Father Mackenzie waited, with barely concealed concern. My announcement was brief and strategically vague. "Friends and family, I apologize for the delay. The groom has experienced a medical emergency and has been taken to the hospital. The ceremony is postponed pending further information. We'll be in touch about rescheduling." The crowd's reaction was immediate and audible. Gasps, shocked whispers, the scraping of wooden pews as people stood. Phone cameras appeared. Everything would be documented and shared within hours. Emma's aunt approached with rapid questions. My business partner offered assistance. Close family members clustered around demanding details. I deflected every inquiry with practiced efficiency, extracted myself from the crowd, and returned to find Emma ready to leave. Albert had brought his car to the church entrance. The drive to St. David's Medical Center took exactly 12 minutes through Sunday morning Austin traffic. None of us spoke during the journey. Emma stared out the window with tear-streaked cheeks. Albert gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, and I sat in the passenger seat, calculating what would happen next. The hospital's automatic doors opened onto antiseptic smells and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly deceased. Warren paced the waiting area like a caged animal, looking terrible in wrinkled clothes and 3 days of stubble. "Emma, Mr. Turner, thank goodness you're here." He started talking rapidly, explaining what he knew, which wasn't much. "I don't understand what happened. He was fine last night." "Where is he?" Emma demanded, approaching the nurse's station with determination born from desperation. The nurse checked her computer screen. "Stanley Parker, exam room 3. Are you family?" "I'm his fiancé. Follow me." The hallway stretched endlessly. Blue linoleum, medical equipment carts, the distant beeping of machines that measured heartbeats and hope in equal measure. Exam room 3's door stood partially open. Stanley sat on the bed, awake now but groggy, wearing a hospital gown and looking confused. An IV line ran into his left arm, monitors displayed steady vital signs, and a young resident stood nearby with a tablet, documenting everything. When Stanley saw Emma in casual clothes instead of the wedding dress he'd been expecting, realization hit his face like a physical blow. "Oh no. Emma, what time is it?" She rushed to his bedside. "Stanley, thank goodness you're okay. What happened?" "I don't know." His voice carried genuine confusion. "I just felt so tired last night. And then I woke up here." The doctor looked up from his tablet. "We found significant levels of zolpidem in Mr. Parker's blood work. That's the active ingredient in Ambien, about 40 milligrams, which is well above therapeutic dosage. I entered the room last, positioning myself where I could observe everyone's reactions. Stanley's eyes met mine across Emma's shoulder, and something shifted in his expression, wariness replacing confusion. "Did you take sleeping pills last night?" the doctor asked. "No." Stanley's response was immediate and emphatic. "I don't use sleeping medication. I just had whiskey at—" His eyes flicked to me again. "At dinner." The doctor made notes on his tablet. "Well, the zolpidem came from somewhere. We'll need to keep you under observation for another few hours to ensure no complications." Emma squeezed Stanley's hand. "But how did it get in your system?" Warren stepped forward. "We were at Mr. Turner's house until late, just drinking and playing cards." All eyes briefly turned to me. I met their collective gaze with perfect innocence. "We were all drinking from the same bottles," I said, which was technically true while being completely misleading. The doctor closed his tablet. "Sometimes these incidents are accidental. Medications can get mixed up, especially in social situations." He headed for the door. "I'll check back in an hour." After the doctor left, Emma held Stanley's hand while he squeezed back weakly. Warren stood awkwardly to one side, still processing events. I watched them all with the satisfaction of a chess master whose endgame was finally approaching. "Emma, sweetheart," I said after a moment, "let me talk to Stanley privately. We need to discuss the wedding logistics, who to call, how to handle the postponement." Emma looked reluctant. "Dad, can't that wait? Just 5 minutes. You look exhausted. Why don't you get some coffee with Warren?" After brief hesitation, she agreed and stepped into the hallway with Warren trailing behind. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Stanley and me alone for the first time since I'd served him that final drink 12 hours ago. I approached the bed slowly, watching Stanley's face as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Hell of a morning, Stanley." His voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you do to me?" I reached into my jacket's interior pocket and withdrew a manila envelope, 9 by 12 inches, brown paper, unsealed. I placed it carefully on the bedside table. "You dropped this," I said simply. Stanley stared at the envelope. "What is that?" "Just some papers I found. Thought they might interest you." I turned toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. "Read them. Then decide what you want to tell Emma. I'll be in the waiting room." Through the door's window, I watched Stanley reach for the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it slowly and pulled out the first document, a photograph of him wearing a Redstone Development employee badge, arm around colleagues at what appeared to be a company picnic. His face went white. Emma approached me in the hallway. "Can I go back in now, Dad?" "Give him another minute," I replied, still watching through the window as Stanley frantically paged through bank statements, email printouts, and employment records that Irving had so thoroughly documented. "What did you tell him?" "Just that we'd handle all the postponement details." Through the glass, Stanley looked up and saw me watching, our eyes locked across the distance. His expression was that of a trapped animal who just realized the cage door had been locked all along. I gave him the slightest nod. "Yes, I know everything." In 60 seconds, Emma would go back into that room. She'd see those papers scattered across the hospital bed. And then, finally, she'd know the truth about the man she'd been planning to marry. My revenge wasn't physical violence or public humiliation. It was something far more devastating, truth itself, delivered at the moment when lies could no longer be sustained. "We're leaving," I said, stepping into the hospital room, where Emma still held that damning photograph of Stanley with his Redstone colleagues. Emma looked up at me, confusion and pain warring across her face. "But Dad, I need answers. I need to understand." "Home," I said, with the authority that had once commanded construction crews through Texas summers. "Everything will be explained there." Stanley struggled to sit up straighter in his hospital bed, IV tube pulling taut. "Emma, don't let him manipulate you. He drugged me. He set this whole thing up." I didn't turn back, didn't acknowledge his desperate words. Instead, I placed my hand on Emma's elbow and guided her toward the door. Albert fell into step behind us, his lawyer's instincts recognizing when it was time to withdraw from a losing battle. The hospital hallway stretched endlessly ahead, fluorescent lights casting everything in harsh relief. Emma walked beside me in stunned silence, clutching the scattered documents against her chest like protective armor. Behind us, Stanley's voice grew more frantic, calling her name, until a nurse finally closed the door to muffle his pleas. Albert's car waited in the parking garage, and the drive home passed in weighted quiet. Emma stared out the passenger window, occasionally lifting one of the papers to study it in the afternoon light streaming through glass. I watched her in the side mirror, seeing my daughter's world reshaping itself with each piece of evidence she examined. We pulled into our driveway at 1:45 p.m. The house stood exactly as we'd left it that morning, before the wedding that never happened, before Stanley's world collapsed, before Emma learned that the man she'd planned to marry had never existed at all. Inside, Emma moved automatically to the living room and sank onto the sofa where she'd spent countless evenings as a child, reading homework assignments aloud while I worked on blueprints at the coffee table. Now she sat surrounded by documents that proved her entire relationship had been a carefully orchestrated lie. "Let's talk in my study," I said. "Albert, please join us." The three of us walked down the hallway to the room where this nightmare had begun, where I'd first learned the truth about Stanley Parker, where I'd planned his downfall, where I'd crushed sleeping pills into white powder just days ago. I pulled the leather chair close to my desk and gestured for Emma to sit. Albert positioned himself near the bookshelf, hands clasped behind his back in his courtroom stance. I opened the safe and withdrew the complete investigation folder, 47 pages of evidence that Irving had compiled with methodical precision. "I need to show you everything," I said, settling across from her. "It's going to hurt, sweetheart, but you need to know the full truth." Emma nodded, her hands folded in her lap with forced composure. I began with the timeline. Friday night, my early return from Dallas, the overheard conversation on the patio. Emma's face remained skeptical as I described Stanley and Warren's casual discussion of her personal life, their laughter at her expense. "You're making this up," she said quietly. "This sounds like something from a movie." "I wish I was," I replied, pulling out my phone and navigating to the audio file I'd recorded. "I'm sorry you have to hear this." The recording played through the study's speakers with crystal clarity. Stanley's voice, unmistakably his, filled the space between us. "Honestly, Warren, I feel sick thinking about having to sleep with her. She's not my type at all." Emma's hands flew to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Warren's response followed. "Think about her wallet, buddy. 72 million company value." And then Stanley again, his words cutting through the room like broken glass. 6 months of patience and we'll transfer all contracts to Redstone Development. The old man won't even understand what happened." Their laughter, casual, confident, cruel, echoed off the study walls before I finally pressed stop. Emma had doubled over in her chair, arms wrapped around her stomach, as if she'd been physically struck. The sound coming from her throat wasn't quite crying. It was deeper than that, more primal. I let the silence stretch, giving her time to process what she'd heard. Albert stood motionless by the bookshelf, his professional mask unable to completely hide his disgust at Stanley's words. Finally, Emma straightened and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "All of it?" she whispered. "The whole year we were together?" I nodded and spread the documentary evidence across my desk. Bank statements showing $45,000 in transfers from Redstone to accounts linked to Stanley Perkins. Employment records proving his real identity. Emails discussing Turner acquisition strategies. Photographs of him at Redstone corporate events. Emma studied each document with the methodical attention to detail she'd inherited from me. When she reached the photograph of Stanley wearing his Redstone employee badge, arm draped casually around colleagues at what appeared to be a company picnic, she set it down very carefully. "This is real," she said. Not a question, a statement of acceptance. Albert stepped forward. "It's all verified through independent sources. Bank records, employment confirmation, communications intercepts. Your father didn't want to believe it either, Emma, but the evidence is conclusive." That's when her anger finally erupted. Emma shot to her feet, sending the folder flying across the room. Papers scattered across the hardwood floor like oversized confetti from a celebration that had turned into a funeral. "You knew?" she screamed at me. "Friday night? For 2 days you knew this and said nothing?" Her voice climbed toward hysteria. "I stood in that church, in my wedding dress, and you just let me—" "Would you have believed me?" I interrupted, my voice steady despite her rage. "Friday night, with no proof, just my word against his?" "Yes, you're my father." "No," I said simply. "You wouldn't have. You loved him. You would have thought I was being controlling, jealous of losing you. You would have married him anyway, and by the time you discovered the truth yourself, it would be too late. The contracts would be transferred, the damage done." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma sank back into her chair, and I could see in her eyes that she knew I was right. If I'd come to her Friday night with wild accusations about corporate espionage and fake identities, she would have defended Stanley. She would have chosen him over me. Albert cleared his throat gently. "Emma, what your father did was protect you from becoming an unwitting accessory to multiple crimes. Stanley committed fraud, corporate espionage, identity theft. By stopping this before the marriage, your father saved you from legal complications that could have destroyed your life." Emma stared at the scattered papers surrounding her feet. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. "You're not," I said firmly. "He was a professional. This operation was planned 18 months ago, Emma. You're meeting him at that architecture conference, arranged by Redstone. They researched you, studied you, sent someone specifically trained to become exactly what you'd fall in love with." Her phone buzzed on the desk, the 15th call from Stanley since we'd left the hospital. Emma stared at it, then looked at me. "Your choice," I said. She answered and put it on speaker. "What?" Stanley's voice poured through the speaker, desperate and rapid. "Emma, please. Your father drugged me. He's manipulating you. Those documents are fake. He set me up." Emma's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "Fake? Like your name, Stanley Perkins?" Stanley stammered for a response. Emma continued with surgical precision. "I heard the recording. Your voice, saying I make you sick, saying you feel sick thinking about sleeping with me. That was fake too. I didn't mean—" "Emma, that was just locker room talk. Guys say stupid things when—" "Don't call me again," Emma said, and ended the call. At 5 o'clock, our doorbell rang, followed immediately by violent pounding. Through the study window, I could see Stanley's car in our driveway, Warren trying unsuccessfully to pull him away from our front door. "Carol!" Stanley's voice carried through the walls. "Let me in! I have a right to explain!" Emma flinched at the sound of his voice, not with longing, but with revulsion. I walked to the intercom system. "Leave my property," I said calmly. "You have 60 seconds before I call the police." "I have a right!" Stanley shouted back. "You have nothing," I replied. 50 seconds. Stanley began pounding harder, and I was already dialing 911. "Yes, I need officers at my residence. 2 men are trespassing and making threats. There's a young woman here who's frightened." The police arrived in 7 minutes. Impressive response time for our neighborhood. Through the window, we watched 2 officers approach Stanley, check his identification, and begin the process of removing him from our property. Stanley tried explaining something about brainwashing and manipulation, but the officers remained professional and firm. "Sir, this is private property. You need to leave." When Stanley continued arguing, one officer's hand moved closer to his handcuffs. "Sir, I can arrest you for criminal trespassing if you don't comply." Finally, Stanley allowed Warren to guide him back to their car. But as they drove away, I could hear him shouting threats through the open window. By 8 that evening, the house had returned to its usual quiet. Emma lay exhausted on the living room sofa, and I'd covered her with the knitted blanket Margaret had made years ago. She wasn't crying anymore. That stage had passed. Now she just seemed empty, drained of the joy and excitement that had characterized her for months. I sat in the chair across from her, keeping vigil. "What happens to him now?" Emma asked without opening her eyes. "Justice," I said. "The legal kind." "Will it be enough?" "It'll have to be." She was quiet for several minutes before speaking again. "Dad, I'm sorry I yelled at you." "Don't be. You had every right." "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping it, for saving me from whatever he was going to do." "Always," I said. I'll always protect you, sweetheart. Emma fell asleep on that couch sometime before 10, physically and emotionally exhausted. I sat watching her breathe until well past midnight, grateful that she was safe, that she was home, that the man who'd planned to destroy our family would never have the chance. Tomorrow, the legal machinery would begin grinding Stanley to dust. Tonight, I simply watched over my daughter's dreams. Monday morning arrived gray and humid, typical June weather for Austin. I'd been awake since 5, reviewing documents and mentally preparing for what promised to be a long day of systematic destruction. Emma slept until 9, the deepest rest she'd had in weeks, finally free from the anxiety that had plagued her without her even knowing why. At 8:30 sharp, Albert and I walked into the Austin Police Department headquarters on 8th Street. The building's concrete brutalist architecture seemed appropriate for the gravity of what we were about to set in motion. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Economic Crimes Unit met us in Conference Room B, along with her partner, Detective James Chen. Both were experienced investigators with reputations for thoroughness. Albert had recommended them specifically. I presented our evidence with the same methodical precision I'd once used for construction project proposals. The audio recording played through their conference room speakers, while Martinez took detailed notes. Chen photographed every document with a department camera, establishing chain of custody for potential prosecution. This appears to constitute corporate espionage, Martinez said, reviewing the bank transfer records. We'll need to coordinate with the FBI's white-collar crime unit. The interstate nature of Redstone's operations puts this in federal jurisdiction. Irving arrived halfway through our presentation, carrying additional documentation he'd gathered over the weekend. His investigator's perspective added crucial context about Stanley's methods and the scope of Redstone's attempted infiltration. Mr. Perkins won't be going anywhere, Irving told the detectives. He's financially ruined and desperate. Classic flight risk factors, but he lacks resources to actually flee. After 2 hours of presentation and questioning, Detective Martinez closed her notebook with satisfaction. We're opening a formal investigation. Don't leave the Austin area, Mr. Turner, as we may need follow-up interviews. But more importantly, we need to ensure Mr. Perkins doesn't disappear. He won't, I assured her. He has nowhere to run. From the police station, Albert and I drove directly to my office at Turner Construction. I'd called an emergency meeting Sunday night with our 12 most important clients, the developers, city contractors, and construction firms that represented 60% of our annual revenue. They assembled in our main conference room at 10:30, faces serious and concerned. Word travels fast in Austin's construction community, and rumors about Saturday's wedding incident had already begun circulating. I addressed them with the straightforward honesty that had built my reputation over decades. Gentlemen, I'm informing you of a security breach that was attempted against our company through personal channels. The attempt was detected and neutralized before any client information was compromised. We've implemented enhanced security protocols, and law enforcement is now involved. Frank Morrison from Morrison Development raised his hand. Carol, should we be concerned about our project data? No, I replied firmly. The individual in question gained no access to our systems or client files. The threat has been eliminated. Questions continued for 20 minutes, but the tone remained professional and supportive. These men had worked with me for years. They trusted my judgment and appreciated my direct communication about the situation. After the meeting, I sent a carefully worded email to our broader client list of 120 accounts. The subject line read simply, Security Update, Turner Construction. The message was brief and professional, mentioning police involvement to legitimize the seriousness without providing unnecessary details. Meanwhile, across town, Stanley was experiencing the other side of my systematic approach. Irving called me that afternoon with an update. Thought you'd want to know what Stanley's Monday looked like. At 11 that morning, Stanley had begun calling Redstone Development, trying to reach his handler, VP of Acquisitions Robert Johnson. The receptionist put him on hold repeatedly before finally returning with, "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson is unavailable. Can I take a message?" Stanley tried reaching other Redstone contacts, project managers, colleagues, anyone who might explain what was happening. Every call yielded the same result. Unavailable, unavailable, unavailable. Finally, desperate, he called a former coworker's personal cell phone. "Dude, you need to stop calling," the man had told him. "HR sent a company-wide memo this morning. You're persona non grata. They're claiming they never authorized whatever you were doing. At noon, Stanley received an email that severed his last connection to financial security. A termination letter from Redstone's Human Resources Department. Effective immediately. Cause: engaging in unauthorized activities and misrepresenting company positions. Severance: 0. Benefits: terminated. He'd tried calling Warren for support, but Warren's phone went straight to voicemail. A text message came back 30 minutes later. "My lawyer says don't contact me. They fired me too. You're radioactive." By 3 o'clock, Stanley was sitting in the strip mall office of Richard Morrison, attorney at law, paying consultation fees with a credit card that was already dangerously close to its limit. "You want to press charges for being drugged?" Morrison asked, reviewing the hospital records. "Do you have any evidence that Mr. Turner administered the medication?" "I know he did it," Stanley insisted. "I was at his house." "That's not evidence," Morrison replied bluntly. "You tested positive for a legal medication that millions of Americans take for insomnia. Unless you have witnesses, video footage, or a confession, it's your word against his. And from what you've told me, he has recordings of you committing several felonies." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "My advice? Hire a criminal defense attorney immediately. You're going to need one." While Stanley's world collapsed, Emma was taking her first concrete steps toward healing. On Tuesday at 2 o'clock, she accompanied Albert to his law office for a formal termination of engagement ceremony. The notary public was waiting with official documents that would legally dissolve all pre-marriage agreements between Emma Turner and Stanley Parker Zal Perkins. Emma signed each page with steady handwriting, her signature firm and decisive. "What about the engagement ring?" she asked, as the notary applied official seals to the documents. "Legally, Stanley must return it within 30 days, Albert explained. "The ring's appraised value is $12,000. If he fails to return it, that constitutes theft, another criminal charge." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "When I get it back, I want to sell it. Donate the money to organizations that help fraud victims." "Poetic justice," Albert observed with approval. Wednesday morning found us at the Travis County Courthouse, where Albert filed for a temporary restraining order against both Stanley Perkins and Warren Phillips. The grounds were extensive: harassment through repeated phone calls, 47 documented attempts, criminal trespassing at our residence, and infliction of emotional distress upon Emma Turner. Judge Patricia Hendricks reviewed our petition along with supporting evidence. The police report from Sunday's incident, phone logs, and witness statements from neighbors who'd heard Stanley's shouting. "This restraining order is granted," she announced, bringing her gavel down with finality. "Mr. Perkins and Mr. Phillips are prohibited from any contact with Emma Turner or Carol Turner through any means whatsoever. They must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from the Turner residence and Turner construction offices. Duration: 30 days, with a hearing scheduled for a permanent order." A process server delivered the restraining order to Stanley that afternoon at the Extended Stay America motel, where he'd been forced to relocate. His credit cards maxed out, his bank account drained by lawyer fees, his future employment prospects destroyed by Redstone's public abandonment. Stanley read the document while sitting on the edge of a bed in a room that cost $40 per night. Just 1 week earlier, he'd been confident and engaged, planning a wedding that would give him access to a $72 million construction empire. Now he was legally prohibited from contacting the woman he'd planned to marry, professionally radioactive, and facing potential federal criminal charges. He tried calling Emma one final time, but an automated message informed him, "This number has blocked your calls." He tried calling me with the same result. Complete isolation. Total defeat. Wednesday evening, I found Emma in our kitchen, preparing dinner for the first time since Saturday. Cooking had always been her therapy, her way of creating order and comfort when the world felt chaotic. The simple act of chopping vegetables and stirring sauce represented healing, a return to normal rhythms. My phone rang as I watched her work. Irving's name appeared on the caller ID. "Thought you'd want to know," Irving said. "Word is that Redstone Development has reached out through intermediaries about settling this quietly. They're apparently willing to pay a significant confidential sum to avoid a federal criminal investigation." "How significant?" "Can't confirm exact numbers, but the rumor floating around legal circles is mid-six figures. Could be as much as $250,000. I felt a smile spread across my face. "Justice takes many forms, doesn't it? Indeed it does. After ending the call, Emma looked up from her cooking. Who was that? Just business, I replied. Nothing important. She studied my face for a moment, then returned to her preparation. Dad, I think I'm going to be okay. I know you are. Because you made sure of it, she said quietly. That evening, as we sat down to the first normal meal we'd shared in a week, I reflected on the comprehensive destruction of Stanley Perkins. In just 4 days, he'd lost his job, his reputation, his fiancé, his income, his legal standing, and his future. Every bridge had been burned, every door closed, every avenue of escape blocked. And this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new consequences, additional revelations, deeper humiliation. Stanley had tried to destroy my family for money, systematically manipulating my daughter's emotions over the course of a year. Now he was learning what real destruction looked like. But tonight, I was content to simply have dinner with Emma, watching her strength return one spoonful of soup at a time. Sometimes revenge is best served as a slow feast, savored over days and weeks rather than consumed in a single moment of violence. Stanley would have months to contemplate his choices, to understand the full scope of his miscalculations, to appreciate the precision with which I dismantled his entire existence. The meal was just beginning. July arrived with relentless Texas heat and gradual healing. The weeks following the restraining order moved deliberately, each day a small victory in Emma's recovery, and my quiet satisfaction watching Stanley's world collapse. Emma started therapy with Dr. Sarah Kim, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Those first sessions were brutal, Emma emerging red-eyed and exhausted. By mid-July, tears lessened, replaced by understanding. I'm learning to recognize manipulation tactics, she told me over dinner. Love bombing, isolation attempts, making me grateful for basic respect. Textbook, predatory behavior. Detective Martinez called weekly with updates. By August, the verdict arrived. Insufficient evidence for criminal charges. Corporate espionage is difficult to prosecute without insider testimony, she explained. But your civil case is ironclad. Albert had met with Redstone's lawyers July 28th. $250,000 to avoid litigation, he reported, plus formal disavowal of Stanley's actions. Emma reviewed the settlement terms. Is it enough? Public acknowledgement matters more than money, I replied. Then accept it. We signed August 8th. 4 lawyers, documents, and closure. The check went into an account designated for Emma's future. Meanwhile, Stanley discovered his reputation was incinerated. Irving's reports showed systematic rejection. 47 applications to Texas firms through July, all failures. References range from silence to damaging. One wrote, "Do not hire, credibility issues." August brought national expansion of his search. The financial industry proved smaller than imagined. Stanley Perkins became professionally radioactive. Irving's final report, subject relocated to Houston August 13th, career in finance terminated permanently. Emma's recovery mattered most. She returned to work late July, half-days extending to full participation. Confidence rebuilt through achievements. First client call, presentation, negotiation. The competence had always existed. Stanley had made her doubt it. We took weekend trips, hill country drives, Fredericksburg lunch, conversations about everything except him. San Antonio weekend in August, Riverwalk talks about her mother, life lessons, opening futures. You saved me when I couldn't save myself, Emma said over dinner, August 10th. That's what family does. Some fathers would have let me learn the hard way. Some lessons are too expensive. August 12th brought a journalist call. Amanda Chen from Austin Business Journal investigating corporate espionage. My refusal was absolute. Private family matter, no comment. She persisted about Redstone targeting. Publish anything identifying my daughter, expect legal action. Her privacy is non-negotiable. The article appeared August 18th, buried on page 6. Local firm thwarts espionage attempt. Vague details, no names. Emma never saw it. Stanley's final contact attempt came August 20th through a mutual friend. He wants closure, the woman explained. What do you want? I asked Emma. Nothing, I have closure. She blocked the friend's number. August 25th brought Stanley's letter. Houston postmark, handwritten desperation. Dear Mr. Turner, I'm genuinely sorry. hoping you might provide a reference, willing to repay damages over time. 2 pages detailing struggles, job failures, remorse. I read twice, filed it away, never responded. Did you write back? Emma asked that evening. No. Good. Silence is the only answer he deserves. Stanley wanted redemption, forgiveness, clean slate. He'd get none from me. Sometimes the most devastating response to betrayal isn't violence. It's moving forward without them, succeeding despite their destruction attempts, thriving in their absence. Stanley had wanted to steal my daughter's future for profit. Instead, he'd given me absolute certainty about who deserved protection and who deserved silence. August 26th arrived crisp, promising summer's retreat. I reached the office at 8 to find Emma reviewing materials for our biggest contract pitch, $12 million for mixed-use development that Redstone had failed to secure the previous year. Coffee? I set a cup beside her laptop. Thanks. Her pencil moved across projections with swift precision. We can deliver 6 weeks faster than any competitor. At 10 sharp, the development consortium arrived. Emma led the presentation with confidence that filled the room like oxygen. Her design was innovative, yet practical. Questions came rapidly. She answered with easy competence. One investor leaned forward. This addresses every concern we had with previous submissions. The project manager stepped out for consultation. 20 minutes later, his smile told us everything. We'd like to move forward with Turner Construction. After they left, Emma was crying. Relief, vindication, joy. You did that, I told her. Your vision, your victory. We did it together. That afternoon, I signed Emma's promotion papers, Vice President of Project Development, with real authority. Are you sure? She asked. Never been more certain. 2 days later, Emma invited me to dinner at her apartment. I arrived to find she wasn't alone. Dad, meet Albert Morrison, she said, introducing a man with calloused hands and honest eyes. Albert, my father. During dinner, I observed their interactions. He didn't dominate conversation or dismiss her opinions. When she took a work call, he asked about her recovery from the difficult situation, genuine concern, not curiosity. After Albert left, Emma sat nervously beside me. What do you think? Tell me about him. They'd met at an architecture conference mid-August, 3 weeks of careful conversations. He feels different, she said. Real, no grand gestures, no rushing, just steady. I'd like to know more about him. You want Irving to check him out? Yes. Do what you need to. Irving's report confirmed my instincts. Albert Morrison, 34, Austin native, family architecture firm, stable finances, no criminal history, no competitor connections. Previous relationship ended amicably. He's clean, Irving said. Genuinely decent, boring in the best way. I called Emma. Your Albert checked out. And? He seems like a good man. But I'm watching. I wouldn't expect anything less. August 31st, I invited Emma for celebration dinner at my estate. First time I'd cooked for company since Margaret's death. We sat on the patio watching sunset paint the hills amber and rose. Can't believe it's only been 2 months since the wedding that wasn't, Emma said. Feels like a lifetime. I feel stronger. You were always strong, just didn't know it. After dinner, she asked, do you regret how you handled it? The drugging, manipulation, systematic destruction. I considered carefully. Regret? No. Question my methods sometimes? Yes. But results speak for themselves. You're safe, company's thriving, he's gone. Would you do it again? Without hesitation. Emma left around 10. I returned to my study, turned on the desk lamp, sat in the leather chair where I'd planned Stanley's downfall. From the drawer, I removed Margaret's photograph, 20 years younger, laughing at the camera. Margaret, I said to the empty room, our girl is safe. I did what needed doing. Methods weren't perfect. I drugged a man, orchestrated his destruction. Some would call it wrong. Maybe they're right. I studied her frozen smile. But Emma's thriving, company's secure, threat eliminated. I protected what we built together. Setting the photograph where lamplight illuminated her face, she'll never know how far I was willing to go. Doesn't need to. Just needs to be safe, happy, whole, and she is. I turned off the lamp, left Margaret's photo for morning light to find. In my bedroom, final thoughts before sleep. Emma would sign that contract tomorrow, continue building her relationship with a man who deserved her, keep growing into the formidable woman she was meant to become. Stanley Parker had wanted to destroy my family for profit. Instead, he'd taught me something invaluable, absolute certainty that I'd do anything to protect what mattered most. Some lessons you teach, others you learn. Stanley learned that betraying the Turner family came with consequences he couldn't survive. I learned that love sometimes requires terrible choices, and protecting family means accepting whatever you must become to keep them safe. Both lessons would last a lifetime. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.